planned for this weekend, Drew? You doing anything fun?
I was just gonna say it's like Fridays don't really mean a whole lot. It's like the same day as every other day. The same day as every other day these days. So nothing too crazy planned. We're probably gonna hang out here, go for a bike ride with my little 2-year-old, and do some hiking and go down to the water. Yeah, that's about it.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Sounds
What about you?
perfect. Well, we are celebrating. Do you celebrate Mother's Day in Canada this weekend?
Yeah, we do. I
Excellent.
forgot about it. Thanks for reminding me, because
No
I do
problem.
have a mother at home. I have a mother and I have a mother at home here too.
They would not be pleased if you forgot all that. So yeah, so we're gonna be celebrating that. I think we're gonna be going to the beach on Sunday and doing a little Mother's Day at the beach, which will
Sweet.
be fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a great plan. So yeah, my Saturday will start out running to the store and getting some flowers and chocolate and all that good
Perfect.
stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Yeah, we've got John. We've got another number. Thank you all for being here. What? Maybe get another minute or so, Drew, just in case anybody else is coming on as well.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
we started recording. We're also live on YouTube right now as well. Um, so exciting stuff. A lot of technology happening today.
Yeah, no kidding. Where's everybody joining us from? If you're popping in, throw it in the chat. Where are you coming from? We have I'm in Gatineau, which is just outside of Ottawa in Canada. Not a lot of people know about Gatineau area, and especially like I don't know, they know Toronto, Vancouver, maybe Montreal, Ottawa a little bit from the capital, but then Gatineau is like it's funny because it's like on the Quebec side, but it's pretty much like the same city. Like we share a lot of things. A lot of people like work back and forth and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm joining from Gatineau, and it's I wish we were getting better weather, but we're getting some West Coast rain weather all week.
Hmm. I did not know that about Gatineau, but I'm glad I do now. Well, I hope it
Yeah.
warms up for you. I'll go next. I'm joining from southwestern Florida, about as far south as you can go before it turns into a swamp in Naples, Florida. Relocated from Wisconsin earlier this past August and enjoying it. We've got some fantastic weather today and have for the past couple of weeks or so.
Very nice. So what do you get from the swamp? You get some, is there a lot of like shrimp and there's some a crawfish or anything like that? Is that like a
Yeah, a lot
southern
of
Florida
shrimp. We
thing?
get a lot of shrimp. That's a big thing. There's some gators. There's definitely some gators out there. I've tried to make, a pair of shoes or a belt out of it. But haven't had any instances, haven't seen any around the homestead, which is nice, which is a real
Yeah,
plus. But
that is
yeah,
very
there's definitely
nice.
some gators. Besides that, mosquitoes. Get a lot of mosquitoes.
See,
um,
that's a no for me. I love warm weather. I
just it.
love the South. I love food, but mosquitoes, you can count me out. I won't be.
They're just out. That's
Yeah,
where Drew is out.
I'm out. Exactly. I'll go somewhere that's warm that doesn't have mosquitoes, but I don't think
That's
you can find somewhere like that.
it's very fair. If there is one out there, let me know if you find it. Well, awesome. Well, Drew, it's 1:03. We've got a few people joining us. If you are just joining us right now, like Drew mentioned before, just mention down in the chat where you're in the Q&A in the chat box. Let us know where you're from. And then, Drew, I think whenever you're ready, how about you take it away?
Let's get her going. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And obviously it's just, yeah, it's Friday, right? So people are kind of popping in, they're having their lunch, they're in the middle of their lunch, and they're like, oh yeah, I forgot about this awesome workshop webinar around the ultimate guide to modern sales playbook. So gonna be popping in, but nice to see everybody joining today. And so yeah, we're kind of really focused on this idea around not just sales playbooks, but helping you guide you through and giving you the tools to build your own sales playbooks and then take it to the next level, which is this modern sales playbook. So how do we put it into action? How do we leverage technology to deliver sellers information and collateral that's in sales playbooks so they're armed and ready for battle, whether they're emailing or discover calls or demo calls, that sort of thing. So super happy to be here with Mark, and yeah, we have one promise for you, and that's just to give you as much as we can. If you have any questions, like Mark said, feel free to pop them in the chat. If you have any comments, that sort of thing, we're here to help you. We're here to give you as much information and tools that we can to help you be a successful sales playbook builder and implementer and sales playbook accelerator, essentially, because as you'll learn a little bit later, that sales playbooks aren't just books that you build and then you put on the shelf and they sit there. They're something that evolve over time. And we're going to be talking about a bunch of different pieces of sales playbooks. And because you did register, we have a bunch of worksheets for you and some homework to do. And you're going to be able to build out your modern sales playbook. So yeah, I'm Drew, the Sales Playbook Builder, Williams, and I run an organization called Sales Playbook Builder. And you guessed that we build sales playbooks. And really, who we focus on are founders and entrepreneurs, new sales leaders, people who are either not familiar with sales or are building a sales team from scratch. So just supporting you in that journey. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Mark.
Yeah, I appreciate it. My name's Mark Evans. I'm the founder and CEO of SalesKit. And like Drew, I love sales playbooks and have fashioned a career out of just being around sales playbooks and creating sales playbooks, both in my corporate career and then when I was a consultant and working with other organizations. And a couple months ago, I was working with an organization that, things just weren't going well when it came to building their sales playbook. We were using Google Docs and we were looking at what other tools we could really try to build and to create in order to really give them the experience that we wanted. I couldn't find a tool on the market, so I created SalesKit, which is a digital sales playbook builder. We'll talk a little bit more about that and how teams are currently using that, but really excited to be here today and really honored to be co-hosting this event with Drew.
Right on. As long as you don't build a sales playbook builder so good that that you're going to put me out of
Never,
work.
never. It's impossible. There's the human touch.
I have a quick question for those that are joining us live, and one for you too, Mark. So today's Friday. Friday afternoon for me anyway. I'm on the East Coast. Some of the West Coasters might be just crawling out of bed or been checking their email. But what's your Friday sales activity? I feel like there's always like this thing around what do you do on Fridays? Is it a good day to follow up? Is it a good day to call? Is it a good day to do catch up? Is it a good day to update the CRM? So let us know in the chat what you're up to on Fridays as a sales kind of sales activity that you typically do. Mark, what's your sales activity on Friday typically? What's your go-to on Friday afternoons?
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do on Friday afternoons, especially, is, and I reserve this time from I want to say 2 to 2:45. It usually takes me. What I try to do is interact with and connect with any connection on LinkedIn primarily that responded or reacted to a post that I had earlier this week or a post that I was tagged in. So I just go through and I'll make a quick little note and I'll say, hey, saw you liked my post with Drew. Thought we would connect here. And so I found that if I do that consistently, it adds a nice a nice extra little side shot into my pipeline.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. Like I've heard a lot and seen a lot of people saying Friday's not a good time to follow up or reach out to people because it's Friday, but I find it's like one of the greatest days to, like you said, have those like soft touch outreach. And whether people respond or not, it's Friday afternoon. So a lot of people in their jobs are they're slowly leaning into the weekend. And so they might be checking their social media, might be just kind of scrolling through their emails and looking through. So yeah, I like those soft touch Fridays, especially in the afternoons.
How about you, Drew? What's an activity you're doing on Friday afternoon?
Well, yeah, similar to you, doing those little the soft touches, and also I like kind of keeping Friday afternoons open for just any sort of like catch up and preparing for the following week, because I like on Mondays to kind of wake up and ready to go, kind of like hitting the ground running, versus like doing that on Monday. So it's a little bit of that like kind of soft follow-up, soft selling, and then preparing for the week ahead. So when I close the computer, close the laptop on Friday, it's like I know when I wake up on Monday, I'm good to go and ready to go for the week.
It's a good feeling to have.
Yeah. Sweet. So let's jump into, we got a lot of content to cover here today. And so what we're going to do now is just kind of frame it all for you. So we're going to be going through kind of the 4 pillars, 4 circles, let's say, of the modern sales playbook. We call it the modern sales playbook method. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the purpose. So why are you building a sales playbook in the first place? So we're going to talk through a couple different reasons why you might be building it. And it's important to think about that before you start building the sales playbook. Is what's the purpose of it? Are we growing our team? Are we launching a new product? Are we bringing on new team members? So thinking through that, that'll help frame your sales playbook. Second thing Mark is going to go through is, okay, so now we know the purpose of it, but what are the actual contents? This doesn't seem to be working very well today. Let's do this. Contents. We'll go old school and type. So we have a purpose. Now we're going to talk about what's in a winning sales playbook. And Mark has a ton of things that you should put in your sales playbook. We're going to condense it today because we have a limited amount of time, but we're going to provide you some resources so that you have everything that would be in a winning sales playbook. And then third, we're going to be looking at actually putting it together. So once we have the sales playbook contents, we have the purpose of it. Now, how do we actually put this together in an efficient way that's not going to take you hours or days or even weeks to actually put together? And then the fourth piece, what we're going to be looking at is actually putting it into action. So how do we have our playbook, we have the purpose, we have the contents, we put it together. Now, what does it look like when we're actually actioning it in real life? Like we were saying, when we're, let's say, prospecting or discovery calls or demoing. So how do we get our team or ourselves to actually use it? And what does that look like in kind of a modern selling world? And when we get this right, you have this like flourishing playbook that supports all the sales activities that either you have been doing or your sales team has been doing, and it enables your team to be better sellers and connect better with buyers. So let's just jump into the first piece, which is the purpose. So why are we building a sales playbook? What we see is kind of three main reasons why you would want to build your sales playbook. So first thing is just organizing all those sales enablement resources that you currently have. Another word you could use for this is documenting. So you might have, I work with a lot of founders who have built a SaaS company to, let's say, 500K ARR, and they've been the one doing the sales, and they have the sales process, they have the email templates, they have this all, but it's in their head. So now it has to be documented and organized. So that's kind of the one of the main reasons. So you might have a bunch of resources, enablement resources and tools out there, processes, and it might be in a Google Doc, it might be in your head, it might be in a LMS system, could be anywhere. And now we want to kind of bring it all together to organize it for the company. The second reason why you might be building a sales playbook, or you might organize it in the first place, and then at some point you go from you as the founder selling or you as the entrepreneur selling to actually growing your team. So having 1, 2, 3 extra sales reps. And so when you're growing that team, you want to make sure that you have the sales playbook and the resources and the best practices documented so that your new reps are hitting the ground running and that they're getting to sell faster than they would if they didn't have a playbook. And Mark's going to talk about some challenges if you don't have these resources in place and how it'll slow down you and your sales team. And kind of the third big bucket is looking at a new offering. So again, I deal with a lot of SaaS companies. So one recently, they had an enterprise product that they had been selling for about 2 or 3 years, and they saw an opportunity to go down market and offer a mid-market product, which was probably about a quarter of the price. And it required a different sales motion. They were speaking with a different ideal customer profile. It was different outreach. The sales cycles were completely different. So it required building out another piece and another chunk of that sales playbook. So that's another reason why you would want to think of building and documenting those sales processes. So if we just kind of recap, you got those three. So it's just organizing, documenting from day one. If you're growing your team, to make sure the new team members have these resources in place. And the third piece is if you do have a new offering, you're going up market or down market. So now we'll look at, now you have the purpose of like why you actually want to build the sales playbook. So let's take a look. Let's go back up to the top and see what's actually in a winning playbook. I'm getting some previews here.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Drew. That's really good on kind of the three main areas on why you'd be looking at a sales playbook. So let's kind of transition then into, well, where do you even start? Where do you even begin to build out the content? And I can be honest with you, this can be a daunting challenge for many sales leaders or entrepreneurs out there. This is where a lot of well-meaning entrepreneurs and sales leaders who say, yes, I want to get organized. Yes, I want to go from a sales cluttered mess to an organized, efficient sales process. But sometimes we get frustrated with knowing, well, where do I even start, right? What do I even need to put into my sales playbook? And oftentimes that's the $1,000,000 question. That's really the hitch and the giddy up, if you will, where it
Mhm.
comes from having ideas and actually being able to take action with it. So in this next slide here, I'll show you really the 6 main elements. And I like to think of these as kind of the core tenets when it comes to building a sales playbook. Now, there's other schools of thought out on there on what needs to be in a sales playbook. Where we kind of come from on this is, hey, these are the 6 ones where you should at least start with. There's certainly more advanced courses that you can take, but this is a great place to get started because building a sales playbook isn't just about putting a bunch of random stuff into a Google Doc. It's really important to know what some of the most important elements are and of a winning sales playbook. And so we believe at SalesKit that there's about over 20, about 38 or so, when we're constantly adding and editing those options as well. So let's start at a high level first, and then we'll dive into the actual plays. So the first one, and just up on the last slide, Drew, I just want to go over that real quick. First one is messaging, having your
Mhm.
messaging dialed in, right, Drew? I know you're a big believer in this as well, and making sure that your messaging is going to resonate actually with your ICP, actually with your ideal customer profile, your prospect. So having that information dialed in when it comes to actually your prospect itself. What markets are they in? What's the typical title you're going to go? What are the challenges that they're seeing on a day-to-day basis? All very important things to make sure that you have inside as an element of your sales playbook. Next, we document the outreach. So what's the sales process looking like? Do we reach out to people via phone? Is it email? What are the sequences? What's the actual step-by-step sequence, or at least tools that you're going to do, like Drew and I were talking about before with these soft outreaches. But what's your kind of go-to-market strategy, right? What's your outreach strategy for these individuals? How are you going to get in front of them? Documenting that. The fourth one is discovery. So we've reached out to them. That's the top of the funnel with our outreach. Now we've got to present. We either have to demo or have a call, whatever that looks like kind of in your sales funnel. Make sure that that's documented from a discovery. What are the
Mhm.
questions you absolutely must have your team ask? What are some of the best practices, and what are some of the areas that they should avoid going through that discovery process? Number 5 is follow up, right? We know that oftentimes it's not a one call close, and there's going to need to be some level of engagement and follow up. And it's not enough to just say, well, call your prospect, hey, Drew, is the money ready yet? What are some of the unique ways that you can follow up with your prospects? What are the case studies they can reference? What are the ROI calculators? What are all those little pieces
Mhm.
of sawdust that are most likely lying around your organization that you interact with all the time, that you could use as a way to get in front of your prospect again, add some value to the conversation versus just asking, hey, is the money ready yet? And last but not least is closing, right? What are the different negotiation levers one can pull? What are the pricing strategies that one can employ when it comes to trying to make an actual deal? So those are those 6. And so we'll make sure that we'll go more into the actual details on what are the plays inside of this. And so let's go to the next slide and we'll start covering those. So we've covered the high level 6 kind of pillar foundational elements, I would say, when it comes to your sales playbook. And I really think that sales playbook should also have 4 main pieces of content as well. Now, these 4 pieces of content really almost become the plays inside of your playbook. If you think of it as a sports analogy, you got the big book, right? Let's go with American football on this one, as that seems to resonate well from a sales playbook side. You've got your offensive side, you've got your defense, you've got your special teams as well. But then what are the actual plays? Like, what's going to happen on third down and we're 6 yards away from getting a first down. So this is the elements. These are some of the elements that need to happen in your sales playbook that you should have. So the first is your story. And that's really documenting the uniqueness of your company's history, your story and vision, and why that's important, because oftentimes it's overlooked, especially by entrepreneurs when you're
Mhm.
starting off and maybe have a smaller sales team. And Drew, maybe you've seen this as well with the companies that you've worked with, where the entrepreneur is so ingrained in the sales process that they feel, oh, well, of course, everybody knows about, the struggle that we had either starting this company, or everybody knows kind of my story, my origin story. Quick story on that. We just worked with an entrepreneur over this past week who was walking through his office and heard, in the span of about 25 minutes, heard 3 different origin stories, all unrelated, and none of them as compelling as the actual story itself.
Mhm.
So, a really good learning lesson there as an entrepreneur. People don't know that story just automatically, and they'll take their own creative interpretation if you don't have a story dialed in and ready to go. So the next is rules of the road. So let's go down to that next slide. Thank you, Drew. Rules of the road, how you want your sales team to operate, right? What are the actions you want them to take? What are the actual processes that you want them to follow as they're going through their day-to-day sales motion? So really important. Some individuals call this an employee handbook or a sales handbook. My experience with handbooks is, as soon as you say that dreaded H word, people's eyes tend to glaze over and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to use this. However, it is important to have some elements of that handbook so that you, as an entrepreneur or as a sales leader, aren't spending your entire day answering questions that could easily be found. You can free up your time, spend it more on higher producing activities.
Mm.
The next one is SOPs, or NOPE, right? One of my famous sayings, I guess, in the Evans household, at least with my 2 daughters who are 9 and 7, is nope on a rope. I feel like I'm saying no a lot. So I've had to come up with some creative ways to say no. And Drew, I'm with a 2-year-old son. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when it comes to that as well.
We hear a lot of no these days. It's great, no matter what, unless you offer a cookie, and then that's always a yes.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah, I am the same way. That works for me as well. So really, we came up with this as a way, hey, there should be some standard operating procedures. It seems like for many organizations that there's a standard operating procedure, from refilling the coffee to shipping your product to what your finance department looks like. However, very rarely are we actually recording SOPs in the main revenue generating function of your business, right? The one area in which your business is surviving off of, and that is sales. So really critical. One of the quick areas, because this can look daunting. Individuals wonder, well, do I need to, write a 73-page manual, or what does that look like? SOPs can be as easy as just taking a screen recording and capturing down that process from start to finish, whether it's logging a deal in your CRM or whether it's requesting PTO through an internal system. There's all sorts of screen recording softwares that make it very easy for you as an entrepreneur, as a sales leader, to start replicating your time. So you're not being asked 15 times over the span of a year or a month or a week, hey, how do I log vacation? How do I do this procedure? How do I
Mhm.
do that procedure?
And I think it's a great point, because I think when people think of documentation and SOPs and playbooks, you think of text. And we're going to
Mm.
talk about actioning it and like what that looks like as a living document and what a modern sales playbook looks like. But I think it's a great idea where it's like, okay, how do I document things without actually writing them down? Like Mark just said, okay, record your screen. Just go to QuickTime and record a screen and say, this is how I go and research prospects. Document it. That counts as a play in your playbook. Now your new rep that comes on, they can open that screen sharing and see it, or the screen recording, and see exactly how you prospect and what's been working for you, versus writing it all out. So don't think that you have to like text everything. You can record it. In fact, it's probably better to do that than it is to just kind of write it down.
Yeah, and I like a combination, right? And it's not an either or type of scenario. It can just be an and scenario. If you like text, right? Some people respond well to that as well. And so if you have that for one play, but then you got a video for the next, don't sweat that. Just start by putting it out and getting that content out there and creating
Mhm.
that content out there. And then last but not least is the selling tools, right? So this is the fun one. This is the sexy one for salespeople that they always love and really want to be a part of. This is what a lot of new hires are always looking for and asking for, right? Instead of a new hire having to recreate the wheel with every new prospecting call or with every email or LinkedIn message, or as you think about your sales cycle, all of those individual touch points that someone would either have to create or they would have to come up on their own. This is a great way to start capturing and documenting all of your different selling tools. What is the prospecting script that you would like your sales team to use? Even if it's not word for word, what are the talking points you want them to use? What are some of the emails that your team has had success with? We're now in a time where sales teams are spread out, sometimes across vast distances, where we used to be in offices and cubicles for many of us, where we could do like this little prairie dog thing where we could lean over a cubicle and be like, oh, Drew just had an amazing way to handle that objection. And that's how a lot of knowledge was shared and was passed from one rep to the next rep, whether efficiently or inefficiently. And we don't have that level of sharing going on right now with a lot of sales teams. So a sales playbook gives you the opportunity to create that level of sharing, to create some of those areas in which your team is really gelling together and using the best practices instead of recreating the wheel or using something that's not as efficient as what another more successful rep is doing.
Yeah. And just feel free to throw your questions in the chat or any comments that you have as you're listening along. If something's resonating with you, or you had a question about, oh, you know what, like, should I put this in my sales playbook? Because Mark just talked about some content. So it's like, is this worth putting in, or is it not worth putting in? Some people, like, what I also like to put into some of the playbooks is some marketing resources, and people get confused thinking that it's like a marketing playbook. But when you're thinking of a seller, you want to know kind of where the leads are coming in and what effort and support that your company is doing to help prospect on your behalf, that you feel like you're part of a team and you're not just kind of by yourself doing one outreach at a time. So if you have any questions about what you should put in a playbook, or what you're curious about, what could go in your playbook, feel free to pop it in the chat, and we'll definitely respond to you.
Yeah, I like that, Drew. And kind of on that note with marketing, I get this question a lot, and I'm sure you do as well, is, all right, how does a sales playbook, does it encroach on marketing's territory, or does it like, mess up the marketing sales approach? And I found the exact opposite, that a sales playbook can actually be a marketer's best friend. Because if we think about what a marketer's job is, right, and what they're often doing is they're developing hours and hours worth of either content or copy or messaging that isn't just being pulled out of a hat, right? Oftentimes they're spending exhaustive resources on creating this copy or whatever it is. And one of the biggest frustrations in my experience in working with marketers is that salespeople will just, kind of make it up on their own, as if you will. And as a salesperson, I am totally guilty of this. I'll like kind of edit or tweak it here, or I'll do something to change it up. So if you're in a marketing position, or if you're an entrepreneur that has maybe a warring marketing and sales faction going on right now, a sales playbook can actually be a really great tool to bridge to those gaps and create some alignment between both of those teams.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So now we're going to, let's go back one more. So now we're going to talk about, so we kind of know what the purpose is. We've defined the purpose. Next step is figuring out, what are we putting in it? And now that we know what we're putting in it, how do we actually put it together? So we have some awesome resources for you that you'll all get at the end, and we'll just quickly run through them at the very end of the workshop webinar here, but they'll be available for download, so you can actually work through these so that you know exactly what to put in your sales playbook, and also like how to actually build it. Because what I've seen is that you probably have big aspirations about putting this together, and you start, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is going to take me forever, man. Like, I'm just going to stop because it's too overwhelming. And all of a sudden you forget about it, and your to-do list grows, and this gets pushed to the bottom. And then all of a sudden you're growing so fast, you need to hire a salesperson, but you don't have anything documented, and you're behind the 8 ball, and you start making some mistakes that we're going to kind of get into, and challenges if you don't have a sales playbook. But
Awesome.
quick, easy way of building it. Go ahead, Mark.
No, I was just going to say that's a great resource, Drew. And I love that you're giving away those worksheets. That's going to provide a ton of value to anybody who either has a sales playbook or is looking to optimize and get more buy in from their current team with those playbooks. I've seen those worksheets, they are awesome.
Cool. So we got a 4-step process of putting together your sales playbook. So you want to put together your sales playbook. First thing you have to do, so 4 steps: audit, align, assemble, and accelerate. So the first step is auditing. So when you think about auditing, it's a little bit scary because nobody wants to be audited. Think of taxes, but we're not talking about taxes. We're talking about just basically figuring out what you have and getting it down, organized somewhere. So again, if you're a founder, an entrepreneur, a new sales leader, and you're tasked with building a sales team, start looking around the organization, in the different areas where documents and information is stored, and just look at what you have. So do you have, and what I like to do, and we have a worksheet at the end of this, is kind of mapping out your sales process. So when you're auditing what you have, what I like to do is kind of just literally write down from start to finish, like from prospecting to closing a deal, write that process out. So reach out on LinkedIn as prospecting, then we make a connection, then we conduct a discovery call, then we, if they're qualified, they go to demo, and then we send a proposal, and then they close. Let's say that's an example. Next step would be auditing what sort of sales resources and enablement tools do we have to support each step in that process. And if you have them, great, get them organized and documented. If you don't, then you might have to start building something. So for example, on a discovery call, you might have been the only one doing the discovery calls, and now you're bringing in a new person to do those discovery calls. An example of a sales enablement resource in that case would be a script or talking points or objection handling document. Or what's even better, we talked about this before, is a recording. So these are all really valuable resources that can go into your sales playbook, but you have to stop and think about them and kind of just get those down on paper first. So the first step is audit. The second step is align. And when we talk about aligning, we can kind of think back to what Mark was just talking about, of those kind of high level, the messaging, discovery, prospects, that sort of thing. So now we're going to align it to different buckets, or you can even call them chapters if we're talking about books. So have an outline of all your chapters, and we're going to give you an outline of those chapters so you can actually do this in Google Docs if you'd like, and then build out your sales playbook in Google Docs and then take it to Sales Kit. But what you do is you audit all your information, then you align it to the chapters and kind of the big ideas. And once you've sorted them and got organized, and it's important to kind of go through this process because you think you can't just open up a Google Doc and start like dumping stuff in. Be organized at the first. So audit, second, align it to the chapters and the major elements. And the third piece is actually assembling it. So once you've got your information, you've got your outline, it's all in there. Now you're going to start tidying it up so that it's presentable, it's legible, and it's actionable for your sales team. And it can be assembled in many different ways. I have a template we're going to share for Google Docs, which I find is just kind of the easiest baseline way of getting a sales playbook built from day one. And then you can look at something like a like Sales Kit, where you can actually bring it into kind of the modern day as opposed to just it sitting in Google Docs. But it's a great way to just organize and get started, is put it in there. And then when you think of the fourth piece, which is accelerate, which is how do you put into action, and also how do you improve it. So once you've built your sales playbook, we talked about it being something that doesn't just sit on the shelf, that you're looking at building and improving every day, every week, every month, every year, depending on kind of what changes in your team or in your marketplace. But the accelerate piece is this piece where we've audited, we've aligned it, we've assembled it. Now we want to make it better. So we can kind of go back and look at our sales playbook and look at some places that we're lacking or missing. So we talked about discovery calls. So maybe you have a recorded discovery call and you've got a discovery call script, but you haven't done anything with, let's say, follow-up procedure or follow-up protocols. So once you've completed that discovery call, what's the next steps? You're like, oh, I just send them an email and I just do this and that. It's like, okay, well, that's great, but now you have to document it and actually build it. So looking at areas where you can improve it and add on to that sales playbook. And in terms of like cadence of when you want to be improving the sales playbook, it's what I recommend is having your playbook open every day so that it's actionable, and also so that you can have a working version of it that you can update and change. So everyone's working remotely, whereas before they weren't working remotely. So if you're selling a tool that, or if you're selling and your typical buying process was going to conferences and networking events, well, obviously your sales playbook is going to change due to the current circumstances. So it's a great opportunity to update that sales playbook according to the current market environment. And so this can happen on a daily basis, could happen weekly or monthly, and also a great piece to add to your ongoing sales meetings is how do we improve the sales playbook to reflect best practices in the sales team.
Yeah. Now, Drew, we have a question that came in. An individual asked, Drew, of these four elements, how long does it take to implement and go through all four?
That was a great question. Who asked that? Can you see her there?
I don't have the name with it. It
Okay.
came in as anonymous. So
okay, right on the anonymous questions. Anyway,
the anonymous, always good ones.
Yeah. So if you think of these four steps: audit, align, assemble, and accelerate. So accelerate is really just an ongoing. So let's not put a time to that one. Putting it together depends on how great you are at putting together documentation. In my experience, it takes a little bit and it's frustrating, and it's not necessarily a time involved. It's just the matter of prioritizing it and sitting down and spending a few hours putting it together. I feel like the biggest challenge and the biggest piece of this is auditing. And it really depends on the size of your organization too, right? If you're a founder there's 1 or 2 people on your team, the audit might not take too long. But if you're part of a 20-person team or 30-person team, or maybe you have a couple salespeople and a sales manager and a marketing team, it might take a little bit longer to kind of like bring everybody together and bring all the elements together. So I'm not giving you an exact time because there is no exact time. The short answer is it depends, and the other short answer is that it takes a while, and that's part of the reason why Mark is around and why I'm around, because we help through this process to actually build it out and give you the tools and the processes to do it better and faster, because we've done it before. It's kind of like any other process or any other thing. You can do it yourself, which will take a little bit longer, or you can do it alongside somebody who's done it before to kind of accelerate that particular process. But I've seen anywhere from, I don't know, like a week to like a month or 3 months, like depending if it's a priority for you or not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, appreciate you answering that, Drew. Thank you. So I want to talk about putting this all into action, right? So we've talked about some of the main elements, how to get started. Now let's talk about actually taking this playbook, right? This thing that is your sales playbook, and let's talk about actually putting it into action. Now, one of the things I want everybody to really understand, and this really comes from Drew's conversation of his previous slides as well. One of the most important things for you to know throughout this entire process is that the playbook is never really quite done. Just like your sales process, just like your sales motions and sequence, sales is an ever evolving process, right? It's not an oil painting. It does change. Therefore, your sales playbook is never really done. But what often stumbles a lot of well-meaning entrepreneurs and sales leaders is that they're looking for perfection before they actually launch it to the entire team. And I certainly believe, and I know, Drew, I believe you do as well, is that it doesn't have to be 100% perfect for you to launch to your team, right? So I want you to focus and take all of this as progress, not perfection, right? We want to focus on at least handing your sales team a tool, right? Even if it's just a small tool at this part, we at least give them something to hold on to, right? And something to at least launch with. So that's my thoughts on focusing on progress and not perfection. Now, one of the challenges that you're going to face when it comes to implementation are some stats I'm going to share. And let's go down 2 more slides, Drew. One of the things that's really standing in the way of a successful implementation and actually using this are a couple things, right? According to a recent study, new hires are really only retaining about 17% of the content and information that's being presented during training and onboarding. So that's a scary stat. So if you're hiring and training and onboarding and going through through that very expensive process of bringing a new salesperson on, keeping in mind that less than 1/5 of everything that's being preached to them, talked to them, shown them, demonstrated to them, only 17% of that is actually being remembered. So that's a bit of a scary one. So if that doesn't shock you into saying, hey, we need to start documenting some of these processes, well, I don't know if anything will, because the next stat kind of plays into that as well, right? And that is the number 4 when it comes to retraining. So what often happens in many sales organizations, and I've been a part of this both as a sales manager as well as an individual who experiences that, is that it takes an individual on average about 4 times that they need to hear something or see something for it to really sink in. Now, as a salesperson and as someone who's had a career in sales, I can say that, like, for sales reps, I think we only need to hear about our commission plan like once to remember that and to lock that in. But when it comes to other elements like documenting something in your CRM, logging a deal, that I think is where it gets closer to 10, and that's where that average comes from. So if you think about that, right, where new hires are only retaining about 17% of the information that they're being received, that they're exposed to. And then it takes an average person about 4 times to hear something. Well, we've got this almost perfect storm. And maybe you've been in this too, where it's like, gosh, Drew, he seems like a really nice guy, but he just asked me the same question, or he just asked me a question that he asked me 2 weeks ago, if you can believe it. And he didn't remember the answer. Like, I don't know, is he a fit for this? Is he going to get it? Right? This scenario is playing out in workforces and on sales teams all throughout North America, right? And probably beyond as well, right? Where we are coming into a situation where someone has to hear it multiple times. They're only retaining about 20% of that knowledge. And then if they ask more than twice to repeat that or to get an answer to that, we start pulling out our hair. Well, I don't have any hair to pull out, but individuals start pulling out their hair, right? Thinking, gosh, is this going to be a fit? What is wrong with this scenario? So all the more reason. And then let's move on to the next one, right? The non-sales activity. On average, sales reps are spending about 2 hours every single day, right? Just searching for the information, for that piece of knowledge that you talked about during your onboarding and training process that's part of that 83% of that content that they didn't retain, right? Now, that may be high, but I think what's even scarier to me, and maybe it is to y'all out there who are listening, is that many times, even if we are searching, we're spending that much time searching for that content, many times employees are just giving up, right? They're just saying like, you know what? I can't find it. So they either make up their own or they ask another employee, right, a coworker who's maybe been making it up this whole time, right? So we have this just almost this compounding effect of can't remember the knowledge, afraid to ask questions, searching for 2 hours every single day just for content and material, right? And so that's why it's more important than ever, because the amount of opportunities that your sales team is missing out on, not just the talent opportunities, but also just the time loss opportunities, are pretty incredible.
Well, I think that's like, it's one of the biggest things. Like I remember reading that stat and a couple other stats around the same idea of just like, you're hiring a salesperson to sell. And if you're hiring them to do sales activities 100% of the time, and there's a bunch of different definitions and what you should be doing as a seller, but what you shouldn't be doing as a seller is looking for an email template or looking for a PDF that you can't find, or looking for an answer to a question, like you said, that you asked a month ago that wasn't there. You just want your sellers to be on the phone, on their computers, on Zoom, with the answers, with the resources, with the insights, like right away. And when they are spending time outside of that, they're not selling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that they're not doing their job. It's the fact that you haven't given them the enablement tools and the resources to thrive in that situation. I think it's so important to realize, especially if you haven't come from a sales background, is that there is a lot of time that you spend trying to support your buyers, because a great seller thinks of their buyer and they think of the buyer journey and how can I empower them? How can I help my buyer make their decision and actually buy our product? And that requires sales enablement tools and resources. So if we can provide those to the sales reps when they need it, it's dramatically going to reduce the time that they're not selling, and therefore they're going to be spending more time selling, which is what you hired them for.
Exactly. I love that. I talked to someone recently who's like a sales guru who said if your sales reps are doing anything besides selling, you need to outsource that activity, right? And they go quite I would say surgical with that. Everything from taking stuff to the post office or to the mail, almost to getting your lunch delivered for you, was about the extent that they were going. But pretty incredible to just reinforce that point. Now, let's talk about reinforcing this. So in this area, I want to share a best case and a use case on how you can reinforce these tools. So first of all, right, if you're building a sales playbook, if you have a sales playbook, one of the worst things that you can do to totally obliterate the work that you have spent time, money, and effort in creating a sales playbook is when a rep asks you and says, hey, Drew, quick question. Can I just borrow 30 seconds of your time? Knock, knock on your door. Hey, Drew, can I just grab you for 3 quick minutes? And they ask you a question that you know is in your sales playbook. And you, because you want to be the great sales manager, the great sales coach, you say, oh, yeah, well, here's the answer, right? We all want to get a win. We want to say, oh, you have come to me. I'm the man. I know this question. I can give you this answer. And then we answer that question. Well, everything that you're doing in that case is fundamentally going against building out that sales playbook. If you want to gain more time as a manager, as an entrepreneur, and you want your team to use and embrace these systems, this is a great way to reinforce. We also have something called a sticky note rule as well. And I picked this up at one of our clients, where anytime they saw a sticky note that was either on someone's desktop computer, and I'm sure we've all seen those, or we have a coworker, or maybe that's you, who has a desktop screen that's filled to the brim with different sticky notes. Every time there's a sticky note, whatever is on that, make that into a sales play, right? If that person found it so compelling enough to write that down, well, then they sure is better. Someone else could probably benefit from that knowledge as well. So that's a great way, 2 quick tools to reinforce whatever is going in your sales playbook. Anything to add to that, Drew?
No, I love just the point of, if it works, if you've done it and you're getting success, document it and update the sales playbook right away. That's why I always have it open for my business, and I always recommend that to my clients is, when you wake up in the morning, you log into your computer, you open your Gmail and your docs and whatever else all the tabs you have. One of the tabs has to be your sales playbook or your business playbook. And that's where you're constantly updating and think about, how do I get better today? 1% better today. If I make a better email today, then I add that email, remove the other one. If I'm getting a better response rate, then I add that one. So if it's working, document it and update so you can get better every day.
I love that, Drew. I really love that. So let's talk about then how you can take that sales playbook from just this, this document, right? That most in some organizations use it as an onboarding and training tool, really into that daily sales helper, right? That tool that your sales team just can't live without. And so one of the ways you can do that is by putting content inside of your sales playbook that is referenceable, that is searchable, and that is actually going to benefit the sales rep while they're in flight, while they're actually either talking to a customer, about to talk to a customer or a prospect, or actually in a sales motion. So I've got a screenshot here. This is our software sales kit that we've talked about in the past, right? And one of the ways in which we're really trying to take sales playbooks from out of the shelf, or from or off the shelf, I'm sorry, or from out of an area where a sales rep just isn't going to use, is by being able to put some of the content that they actually need to reference during a phone call. So for example, we have right here is documenting your objections, right? So most of us know, if you've been at an organization for any period of time, we know the common 5, 10, maybe even 15 different objections that your service, or your product are going to run up to. Well, if you're in a position to, why don't you just start documenting what those objections are, and then what the best practice is as well. So this is a great example of the playbook transcending just from, well, it's a document that we use for an onboarding and training perspective, to, hey, this is how we use it to actually close sales, to handle objections, and to move prospects through the pipeline. So just a great example of how to do that, and to really help as a sales coach as well.
So like in practice, I'm trying to help people put their minds, or like kind of summarize what we're talking about. So we've defined the purpose of our playbook. We've figured out what's in it. We put it together, and now we're actioning it. So you're picturing this playbook. People always think of books that just sit on the shelves, but now we have this living document, living plays, support systems for the sales reps. So you build your sales playbook, you put it into sales kit, and now as a rep, so I might have reviewed these objection handles maybe a couple times as part of my onboarding. I'm
Yeah.
not the founder. I'm not the sales leader who's gone through this a million times, and I can just rhyme them off without even looking. So I could have two screens or split screen, and I would have my call with my prospect, which would be Mark, and we're on a discovery call, and I can have this on the other screen. And when I go through my discovery call script and I ask Mark, okay, like, what do you think? Should we move on to the next step? Do you want to schedule another call with your team? And he tells me, well, I just want to think about it. Instead of me trying to figure, okay, what would be a great answer and kind of using maybe what I've tried in the past. Now, whoever put this together, this obviously works because that's why they've documented it.
Hmm.
Now I can just pop right to it. Oh, you know what? I know you want to think about this and da da da. Do you mind if I just get an idea of the solution right now? And now that the playbook, now it's like these plays are coming out exactly when the sales people need them, and it's empowering them with what's worked in the past to make them as successful as they can. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give them the tools to just go and crush it.
Exactly. And we found, Drew, and I know you have as well, that if you give a sales rep tools like this, it'll help get whatever activity, whatever action you want your sales team to emulate. So for example, right, if you want your sales team to make more cold calls, well, one of the best ways to do that is to give them the tools that's going to make them more successful in either handling the objections, talking to a prospect, or getting over that fear of making that cold call. Because often it's because we don't have the maybe the skill, or we don't have the resources that we need to go out and make those calls. So this is a great way to help feed the level of activity that and the actions that you want that team to actually take.
Yeah, and it's especially great too when you have like if you're a company and you're selling, let's say, to C-level, director level, senior level people, and you're hiring junior reps. So if you're hiring an SDR or a BDR to do the prospecting, to do the discovery calls, and maybe they have 2 years experience, maybe 3 years experience in a different industry, maybe even the same industry, but if they're calling someone that's 20 years older than them that has 20 years experience in that industry, it's intimidating. It's hard to like
Yeah.
level the playing field. So one way to level the playing field is taking what you've learned as that leader or the founder and the insights that putting them into these objection handles or documenting it. And that helps level the playing field so that new rep is able to speak as if they were a colleague of someone who's been in the industry for 20 years. And obviously over time and experience, you gain that, but how do you help them on day one and day two and month one and month two? This is how you do. You document it and you give them the tools so that they're confident having those conversations.
Love it. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, Drew, let's tell the people how they can get started.
Yeah. So again, if you have any more questions or feedback, we're just kind of wrapping up here. Going to share a couple templates and worksheets that you can download. And I think what we'll do is we'll kind of give some instructions with the worksheets as part of the follow-up when we'll send this all out to you, and we'll give some outline in terms of like how to work through the worksheets together. But so we've talked about how to build your modern day sales playbook, and now it's about, okay, how do we put this in action? What do I do like tomorrow? What do I do right
Mhm.
now? So after you have watched this and you've gone through it and you're all pumped up about building your sales playbook, obviously the first thing you have to do is start documenting and auditing it. That was the first piece. So what I've done for you is put together, and we're going to share all this with you, is put together a sample Google Drive where you can audit and align the documents that you currently have. So we have kind of these folders, general folders out here. You can change them, update them. You just make a copy and do it yourself, depending on what's in your sales playbook. And we're also including a template for your sales playbook. So talking about the all about us, the selling, the prospecting, discovery, all that sort of thing will be in there to give you some framework to get started. And then the other piece that we're going to do too is like this worksheet. And again, we're going to give you some deeper instructions just as a follow-up, but essentially to get started when you're looking at, okay, auditing what you have. So let's look at what's in a playbook. Here's a few examples. Mark has an example. I think there's like 20 plus elements of a winning sales playbook. So we'll add those in too. But the way this works is you just take a look at your examples, you document what you currently have and where is it, whether it's in your head or in a Google Doc or scratched down on a piece of paper somewhere, and then you start aligning it to the big ideas and chapters that we were talking about. So giving you a head start to building that playbook out. And the other piece is looking at your sales process from when I talked at the beginning about prospecting, discovery, demo, proposal, and closing, and handing off to customer success, documenting that entire journey, and then looking at what are those supporting sales enablement resources and the people that are going to support each of those processes, because those are important to include and document in your sales playbook. And another thing we didn't really talk about too much, but again, we're talking about selling. We have to sell to somebody. We're selling to our buyer. So the better connection, the better empathy you can build with your buyer, the better it is. So this is a great way to kind of peel back the layers, get deeper in that, let's say, iceberg of who your ideal customer profile is. So most people just typically look at the ideal organization, ideal person. So I'm selling to a VP of sales at a company that has 10 plus salespeople, and we sell to the United States. It's like, that's great, but what's a day in their life look like?
Yeah.
What are their pains and challenges? What are their aspirations? What do they value? And again, this is talking about equipping your sales team with the knowledge and insights to have better conversations, because if you have better conversations and you can imagine yourself in your prospect's shoes, the better you can at diagnosing their problems and seeing if your solution that you're selling is going to help them out.
Love it. Great resources there. We'll follow up in an email. You'll get an email to all of those worksheets as well as the recording of this video if you want to share it with coworkers, family, friends. I don't care who you share it with. Feel free to share it with whoever you would like as well. And we'll also make sure all that content is in there. So wide open now for Q&A. I know we've got a few more minutes here left on the clock, so it's wide open with Q&A. Drew and I will stick around to answer any and all of your questions. Drew, any final parting words here?
No, I think the final parting words is just start. Like, don't be afraid. We talked about a couple different ways of starting and what you should have in your playbook and not. And when I started Sales Playbook Builder, I started by documenting what I'm doing, and I literally had that Google Doc open, and it was blank on day one, and it just started building and building. And when I go back and look at it, and I look at it today, and it's open, you're proud of it, but it takes baby steps to kind of build that out. So don't be afraid of just starting to document, because one of the biggest kind of aha moments that I get from my clients that I work with, mostly founders, is, oh, I didn't even realize I had a sales process. I didn't realize I was doing this anyway. And the act of documenting it, the act of formalizing that, really helps solidify the fact that you have a process that you're taking your prospects through that works. And so you need to document that so you can share that with your new teammates. And I guess one other piece is, when you're talking about that, the origin story and the founder story, I've worked with founders as the first sales rep, and there's something magical about founders that when they walk into sales meetings and they walk into groups of people and they're selling their product, they have a connection with their audience like no seller can even imagine, because you're a founder, you've started something because you saw a need, or you had some sort of personal connection with it, and you just connect with it so much that you're just really the best, let's say the best salesperson, which is awesome. And you need to document that passion. And the best way to document that passion is through recording your calls. So if you have discovery calls and demo calls right now, and in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 6 months, whatever it is, and you're going to be hiring salespeople because you want to go from 500K ARR to 10 million ARR, and you know you need a salesperson, start documenting it now so you can capture those nuances and essence of what makes you and the company so special.
I like that. I really like that. We've got a question. Well, not so much a question now that I'm reading it, more of just a statement. So shout out to Ed Sullivan. He had to jump on another meeting, but appreciates the great presentation, the practical examples provided. So that's Mr. Ed Sullivan. Ed, thank you. I know you're no longer on the program, but thank you for those kind words. So if anybody else has any questions, we'll take them now. Yeah, I could agree, right? Just starting is often the most difficult part for anybody. but right, you'd rather get started, you'd rather have something than, there's nothing worse in my experience than like you get all excited, you go through this lengthy hiring process, recruiting process, interviewing process, and then that dreaded like Sunday night, the Monday before your new hire is about to start, it's like, what are we going to cover? Like, what are we going to do for, the next 3 weeks or something while they're supposed to get up to speed? And so that's where a playbook can just be your best friend when you crack that baby open or you log into it, and you're able to systematically go through and educate and take that sales process that's stuck in your brain as a founder, as a sales leader, or as a veteran salesperson, and just download that onto someone else. That's when you really start to see freedom, either in your business or on your sales team, when you're able to start replicating that sales process and take someone through that awesome onboarding experience. So I don't know about you, Drew, but I've been in onboarding experiences where it's like, all right, hey, Mark, very nice to meet you. The bathroom's that way. Here's your phone. And if you could just start making calls and sell some product, that'd be great. And it's like, what? Like, what are we going to do?
One quick story on that, because it's a great example. The first time I was working with the founder as the first sales rep, we had some processes, but we didn't really kind of have a formal sales playbook documented. I think a lot of it was in the founder's head. And so we were sitting together in a shared office space in Toronto, and the founder was beside me and our customer service success person was just in front of me. And we're just going through the cold calls, and we had a CRM set up so you could just do my cold calls, and did a cold call and actually turned into like a demo like right away. Cause we were just kind of happened that way. And the person on the other line was like, yeah, great. I'd like to sign up. And this was like the first sale I was ever made. And so I was like, okay, let me call you back, because I didn't know what the next step was. We never got to that point. It was just like, hey, here's the demo, here's the discovery, here's how you prospect, go crazy, start making your phone calls.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's teach the entire process. So luckily I like hung up the phone, turned to the side and was like, okay, founder, what's next? How do we sign these people up? And luckily I called back and
they still picked up and they were still interested. Yeah,
exactly. So thank goodness, but you don't want your sellers in that position at all.
Having to dictate, having to force their way through your buying process. I totally get it. Well, we're at 2:00 here. Does anybody have any other questions at all? We've got a few individuals hanging around. If you have questions, feel free. If you just want to hear Drew and I's banter, that's perfectly fine too. This could be the first, podcast episode of two sales guys. I don't know. We'll have to come up with a catchier show title. But if you are still hanging around, please feel free to ask any questions. We do get some open time here and we can take some Q&A. If not, we'll be sending all of the content, the worksheets, those bonuses that we had talked about off here shortly. All right. Well, Drew, it's been a lot of fun working with you on this one. I'm sure we will do many more of these. I had a lot of fun. Did you have fun?
Of course. I love it. It's always nice meeting with a fellow sales playbook enthusiast. We're a small group of people, but we need to stick together.
Small but mighty. Well, excellent. Well, we'll sign off here. For those two that are remaining here on the program, we appreciate your attendance to the ultimate guide to Modern Sales Playbook. Really excited to have you here, and catch us around. Drew, we'll do more of these. I look forward to working with you in the future.
Enjoy the weekend, everybody. Thanks for popping in.